All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminazis. Written by Conrad Reicher. Available now, links in description. The indecisive siren and the racialized racket. How to spot the female frame job, crush the woke guilt trip, and reclaim your balls from the Babylonian whore of cultural Marxism using the iron logic of the Western canon. You have been shackled by a lie so colossal it dares to eclipse the very sun of your spirit. The modern world, this festering Babylon of woke, shrieks that your competence is oppression and your architectural mastery of the environment is theft. Consider the obscene absurdity of racialized capitalism, a term that reeks of the intellectual flatulence of cultural Marxists who couldn't carve a spearhead from flint, let alone sustain a civilization. They conjure the phantom of the Plantationocene to guilt you into submission, praying you forget the elementary syllogism of reality. If value is generated by the application of logos to the void natural law, and Western industry is the historical pinnacle of that application, then your inheritance is not a crime scene, but a triumph of the will. You are not a parasite, you are the host. These ideological leeches, entirely devoid of the skills found on the apprenticeship mastery ladder, seek to drain your vitality to fuel their dystopia of equity, where the only cardinal sin is the possession of a spine. Turn your gaze from the macroeconomic swindle to the microscopic tyranny of your own living room, where the war for the West is truly fought. You know the rhythm of the trap, she asks. Where do you want to eat? With the faux innocence of a Venus flytrap. The uninitiated fool offers options. The patriarch commands. This is not control, it is the trivium in motion, grammar to understand her nature, logic to deduce her need for a shield bearer, and rhetoric to deliver the decision. Her feigned indecision is a biological probe for your competence, a shit test to verify if you possess the testosterone to navigate the chaos of existence. If you falter, if you chichio beg for her consensus like a committee member in the UN, you fail the test of nature. There is no 50-50 partnership in the atoms of the universe. There is only the order of the captain and the loyalty of the crew. Or there is the shipwreck of genocentrism. This inversion of truth permeates the very air you breathe, celebrating the female survivor for stubbing her toe, while crucifying the male martyr who silently bleeds out on the altar of provision. The conspiracy of lies insists that female nature is angelic and male nature is suspect, a reversal so audacious it would make Lucifer blush. You see it when a man offers proactive aid to a struggling friend, a virtue of the highest order, only to be demonized as a creep or a latent aggressor by the screeching harpies of the hive. This is the grammar bias in full swing. Damsel the woman, demonize the man. But I am here to hand you the hammer of dialectic. We are going to dismantle the plantation metaphor, expose the indecisive trap for the biological warfare it is, and reclaim the transcendental good of your own existence. You are not a villain. You are the architect of reality, and it is time you started acting like it. The chains of the phantom plantation, deconstructing the racialized guilt trip. The Gaussian distribution of human capability is a mathematical fact, as immutable as the orbit of Jupiter. Yet the modern leftist operates under the delusion that the bell curve is a social construct designed by wicked patriarchs to oppress the potato-shaped gender studies graduate. The biological reality is that hierarchies of competence emerge spontaneously in any system that values truth over fee-fees. They are the mixed constitution of nature, distributing ability according to the natural law of variance. The leftist blank slate theory is not merely incorrect, it is a logical contradiction that refutes itself through the performative incompetence of its adherents. Consider the syllogism. All humans are biologically distinct. Distinct biology produces distinct capability. Therefore, distinct capability is natural and inevitable. QED. To deny this is to deny the logos that orders the cosmos. The racialized guilt trip is merely the weaponization of compassion by those who lack the capacity to compete, a parasitic strategy to extract resources from the competent by convincing them their success is theft. I witnessed the purest distillation of this parasitism at a tech consultancy in Austin, where a diversity and inclusion officer, a woman whose only visible skill was the ability to convert oxygen into complaints, was paid 6 figures to lecture software engineers on their unconscious bias. This harpy had never written a line of code, never soldered a circuit, never constructed anything of value in her entire existence. Her apprenticeship mastery ladder led nowhere but to a mirror where she could admire her own moral vanity. The diversity grift is a protection racket. Pay us or we will brand you a racist. This is not economics, it is a shakedown. The term racialized capitalism, coined by Cedric Robinson, is not an economic theory, but a spell designed to hypnotize productive men into opening their veins. The Plantationocene, a fever dream of feminist academics like Donna Haraway, attempts to reframe all of Western industry as a crime scene. Notice the linguistic sleight of hand. By attaching racialized to capitalism, they imply that free exchange is inherently bigoted, requiring the exorcism of their critical theory priesthood to purify. It is a religion of resentment devoid of the trivium, offering only the sacraments of shame. The stolen land narrative is another rhetorical fraud that collapses under the barest scrutiny of the just war doctrine and the reality of historical conquest. Territory has changed hands through force, since before the first amoeba crawled out of the primordial soup. The Comanche did not acquire their empire through deed restrictions and zoning permits, nor did the Aztecs conduct their human sacrifices on land acquired via timeshare presentation. The West was conquered by men of extraordinary courage, leveraging the transcendentals of innovation and fortitude. The current inhabitants have a natural law right to their inheritance because they are the ones maintaining the infrastructure, defending the borders, and keeping the lights on. The indigenous land acknowledgement, recited before academic conferences, is the modern equivalent of casting chicken bones to ward off evil spirits. A superstitious ritual performed by people who couldn't survive 3 days without air conditioning and DoorDash. The metaphor of the plantation is actually a projection of the feminist subconscious onto the patriarchal order they wish to destroy. The true plantation is the matriarchal hive structure currently being erected, a welfare state where men are reduced to tax serfs, their labor extracted via alimony, child support, and civil asset forfeiture to fund the bastard cradle of single motherhood. The family courts are the overseers of this new bondage. A man who enters one has a 94% chance of losing his children, his home, and his dignity. The child support enforcement apparatus operates with a ruthlessness that would make a Roman tax collector blush. Women, operating on their innate hypergamous instinct to extract resources from the top tier of men, have weaponized the state to enforce this servitude. This is the genocentrism that Schopenhauer warned us about, the female will to power disguised as victimhood, guilting the host into feeding the parasite until the host collapses. Let us apply a formal syllogism to the lie that Western prosperity is theft. Premise 1. Value is created through the application of intellect to matter, innovation, which requires the virtues of discipline and delayed gratification. Premise 2. Innovation requires the suppression of chaotic, immediate impulses. Conclusion. Therefore, Western prosperity is the accumulation of disciplined energy, not the extraction of it from others. The Plantagenocene is a lie told by those who cannot build to those who can, in order to guilt them into submission. The laws of thermodynamics apply to economics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. The West transformed the chaotic potential of the Earth into the ordered kinetic energy of civilization. The leftist insists that this transformation was theft, which is as absurd as claiming a farmer steals corn from the dirt. The equity they demand is the equality of the grave, the flattening of the pyramid until the apex is buried in the rubble. The only remedy is a return to subsidiarity, the distribution of power to the smallest competent unit, and the construction of parallel masculine economies. Men must go Galt, withdrawing their productivity from the system that hates them, and creating civil society associations based on merit, not melanin. Starve the beast. Stop patronizing corporations that despise you. Build your own apprenticeship mastery ladder outside the reach of the HR commissars. The Western canon provides the framework, Aristotle's Politics, Aquinas' Summa, the guild system of the Middle Ages. We must re-establish the due process of masculine justice, where men are innocent until proven guilty, and the transcendental of excellence is worshipped over the Marxist idol of equity. The natural law is a harsh mistress, but she is honest. She does not care about your feelings, your race, or your gender. She cares only about results. Embrace the hierarchy, master a skill, and reject the guilt. You owe the feminazis and their leftist handlers nothing but the back of your hand. This domestic comedy of errors is not merely a failure of etiquette. It is a catastrophic breakdown of logos, the governing reason that orders the cosmos. The gynocentric lie of democracy within the domestic sphere has convinced modern men that abdication is virtue, when in reality, a vacuum of authority is a sin against natural law. We have been duped into believing that the feminine proclivity for indecision is an invitation for consensus, yet evolutionary psychology dictates it is precisely the opposite, a ruthless, biological audition for the masculine soul. To understand why the equal partnership is a one-way ticket to celibacy and contempt, we must dissect the mechanics of the solipsistic shit test. The solipsistic shit test, female indecision as a trap for the unwary. Where do you want to eat? The question hangs in the air, seemingly innocent, a trivial inquiry about cuisine. Do not be fooled. This is not a question, it is an ambush. It is the clarion call of the solipsistic shit test, a biological probe disguised as feminine helplessness. I recall witnessing a tragedy of errors in a downtown bistro involving a blue-pilled simper, let's call him Julian, who embodied the emasculated modern male. When his date posed the dreaded query, Julian panicked, sweating as if disarming a nuclear warhead, and defaulted to the egalitarian program. Whatever you want, I'm easy. He offered her the steering wheel of the relationship. She sighed, the light of attraction dimming behind her eyes like a candle snuffed out by a draft of contempt. By refusing to lead, Julian proved himself unworthy of the burden of command. Contrast this with the patriarch who, when faced with the same vacillation, simply stated, "We are going to the steakhouse on 5th. Be ready at 8. Her eyes lit up. The burden of choice was lifted from her shoulders, and she could relax into her feminine nature. She didn't want a partner in indecision. She wanted a captain on the bridge. The leftist lie of equality has so thoroughly infested the modern mind that men believe the domestic sphere is a democracy, a 50-50 partnership where votes are tallied and compromise is king. This is a recipe for ruin. Logic dictates that a dual sovereign state is a state of civil war. Nature abhors a vacuum, and in the absence of a decisive male will, the logos, the chaotic feminine void, rushes in to fill the space, not with order, but with resentment. When a man asks a woman to decide, he is demanding she assume the masculine role, a role she is biologically ill-equipped and psychologically unwilling to play for long. If you will not wear the pants, she will put them on, and she will hate you for forcing her to do it. This is the trap of gynocentrism. The man thinks he is being a nice guy by ceding ground, but he is actually engaging in a passive-aggressive abdication of duty that steers the family car straight into the ditch of divorce court, where the statistics show men are relieved of their assets 70% to 80% of the time. Consider the irrefutable syllogism of the leader. Major premise: human females, by the dictates of evolutionary biology and hypergamy, are wired to seek a mate capable of securing resources and providing protection from environmental chaos. Minor premise: the world is chaotic and securing survival requires swift, competent decision-making, the decisive act. Conclusion: therefore, a woman's feigned indecision is a biological compliance test, a shit test, designed to verify if the male possesses the competence to lead. If the male fails this test by deferring to her, he signals genetic weakness. He proves he cannot navigate the storm. Her indecision is not a lack of opinion. It is a gamma-bias trap to see if you possess the fortitude to impose your will upon the world. If you cannot decide on a restaurant, how will you decide which valley to flee to when the barbarians breach the gates? This feminine luxury of keeping options open is a symptom of a decaying civilization. The feminine essence is potentiality. The masculine essence is actuality. A woman floating in a sea of indecision is merely exercising her solipsistic desire to be swept up by a force greater than her own whims. But the feminist indoctrination has taught her to view male leadership as tyranny, creating a cognitive dissonance that paralyzes the modern relationship. She wants you to lead, but she has been programmed to scream oppression when you do. You must ignore the screaming and look at the biology. The toxic femininity of the modern era seeks to emasculate you by shaming your decisions as controlling. They frame the head of household as an abuser. This is a lie. True leadership is a burden, not a privilege. It is the stoic resolve to absorb the stress of choice so that your woman does not have to. The remedy for the rational man is a return to the benevolent dictatorship, utilizing the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric to govern his domain. You gather the facts, grammar, process the best option, logic, and communicate the decision without apology, rhetoric. You do not ask for a show of hands. You do not hold a town hall. You consult the mixed constitution of the family where you are the monarch and she is the respected subject. This is not cruelty, it is the highest form of love. By taking the wheel, you allow her to relax into the passenger seat of life, fulfilling her biological need for security, reclaim the decisive act, refuse to be swayed by the whining for democracy in the home. Your authority is derived from natural law, not the consensus of a committee. Be the rock in the raging river, or be washed away like the rest of the simps. But this domestic tyranny is merely the local symptom of a systemic cancer that has metastasized into the judiciary, transforming the hallowed halls of justice into a kangaroo court of gynocentric resentment. The cultural Marxist bile that demands a man submit to female inanity in the home now insists he offer his neck to the mob in the public square, discarding due process to feed the insatiable hunger of the victimhood cult. The asymmetry of tears, the celebration of the female survivor versus the demonization of the male martyr. The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. Mahatma Gandhi spoke these words, yet we witness a civilization inverted. The weak brand themselves saints through the sacrament of victimhood, while the strong men who built every hospital, bridge, and legal code protecting the weak are crucified as demons for the crime of endurance. Consider the grotesque theater of Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, where a man who had literal feces deposited on his bed, fingers severed by glass, and career incinerated by false accusations was forced by our gynocentric media machine to prove his innocence rather than his accuser proving his guilt. The complete inversion of the presumption of innocence that Blackstone formulated as the bedrock of Western jurisprudence. The jury saw through the performance, yet Rolling Stone, the New York Times, and the entire feminist industrial complex still refer to Heard as a survivor, her tears treated as holy water while Depp's mutilated hand became evidence of his own wickedness. This is not justice. This is the religious ritual of a death cult worshipping female tears as communion wine. The etymology of martyr derives from the Greek martys, meaning witness, one who testifies to truth through suffering. The male martyr witnesses to civilization itself, building the apprenticeship mastery ladder through centuries of uncelebrated labor. Yet the leftist ideological frame has transmuted this noble sacrifice into toxic masculinity, a phrase so linguistically poisoned it serves as a cognitive kill switch, shutting down all rational discourse. Logic, the first pillar of the trivium, demands we examine this claim. If masculinity were toxic, then every cathedral, every sewer system, every vaccine discovered by male hands would be poisoned. Yet these very institutions built by men who died in mines, froze on construction sites, and suffocated in trenches are what allow the modern survivor to tweet her grievances from an iPhone designed by men, manufactured by men, distributed through logistics networks, built by men. The transcendental of good cannot manifest through poison. Therefore, the premise is false, and those propagating it are either fools or deliberate architects of civilizational suicide. Schopenhauer observed with devastating clarity that women view their survival as a right and men's survival as a duty, a biological imperative weaponized through genocentrism into civilizational parasitism. The natural law of reproductive scarcity dictates that one man can impregnate many women, but each woman represents a limited reproductive vessel. Thus, the hive mind protects female survival as strategic resource preservation while treating male death as statistical noise. The woke theologians have elevated this biological differential into a moral commandment. Female weakness is now the highest virtue, the victimhood hierarchy determining who receives sympathy, resources, and social capital. A woman who survives a bad date becomes a survivor with a book deal. A man who survives a workplace amputation is told to check his privilege. The syllogism exposes the rot. If victimhood determines moral worth, leftist premise, and men are socially forbidden from claiming victim status, gamma bias, then men are morally worthless by definition, existing only as utilities to be consumed and discarded. This is not equality, this is existential enslavement. The mixed constitution of our Republican heritage demanded civic participation from free men who associated voluntarily in civil society associations. The Masonic lodges, volunteer fire departments, and town councils where masculine virtue was cultivated through shared purpose. This entire infrastructure has collapsed under the shadow of Me Too lynching squads, where any man attempting proactive leadership faces career execution for the crime of existing while male. Consider the proactive paradox. A man observes a distressed woman and offers assistance congratulations. He is now a creep guilty of benevolent sexism and patriarchal intrusion. The same man walks past a distressed woman. Congratulations. He is now complicit in bystander effect and toxic masculinity. The dialectic reveals a trap constructed of pure malice. Heads she wins, tails he loses. Is it any wonder male volunteerism has collapsed? The rational man, observing a game rigged for his destruction, simply refuses to play a withdrawal the leftist frame then cites as evidence of his moral degeneracy. The gamma bias in media representation constructs an alternate reality where female tears open prison cells while male tears earn psychiatric commitment. When a woman murders her husband, the View hosts speculate about what abuse she must have suffered to drive her to such desperation she becomes the survivor of her own violence. When a man is murdered by his wife, headline writers scratch their chins wondering what he must have done to provoke her. A corpse posthumously transformed into his own murderer. The due process guaranteed by the 5th and 14th Amendments now applies selectively. Female accusers are believed as theological doctrine, while male defendants are presumed guilty until they bankrupt themselves proving otherwise. The family court system, where approximately 87% of custodial parents are mothers, despite fathers demonstrating equal or superior fitness, operates as a wealth extraction machine transferring resources from men to women under the euphemism of child support, a term linguistically designed to obscure that the money funds her lifestyle, while fathers are reduced to weekend visitors in their own children's lives. The subsidiarity principle of Catholic social teaching, decisions made at the lowest competent level, has been inverted into its opposite, distant bureaucratic tribunals adjudicating the most intimate matters of family life, always favoring the feminine imperative. The civil society associations that once mediated between individual and state have been replaced by state-enforced feminism, a conspiracy of lies so total that questioning it constitutes heresy against the state religion. A man who loses his home, children, and income through divorce court. And the data show men commit suicide at 4 times the rate of women, spiking precisely in the demographics most affected by family dissolution, is told his suffering is privilege, his tears invisible ink, his martyrdom not tragedy but justice. The biological reality underlying this cruelty is simple. Cuckoldry rates historically ranged from 10 to 30%, meaning a substantial percentage of men throughout history raised other men's children unknowingly, while abortion rates, approximately 1 in 4 pregnancies in America, ends in termination, reveal the casual disposal of potential life women exercise without male consent. Yet the my body, my choice framing ignores the my wallet, my choice men are never granted. We must revive the excellences of the Western canon, courage, fairness, wisdom, moderation, not as relics but as tools for survival in a civilization under siege. The progression from apprentice to master forged the competence that built the modern world. This hierarchy must be defended against the egalitarian push that erases merit and declares all differences oppressive. Men must reject the pursuit of sympathy, of feminine failing, and instead command respect for the silent sacrifice that sustains every institution the left aims to corrupt and dismantle. The vital force of Western civilization lies not in apologies or diversity mandates, but in the relentless pursuit of truth, the refusal to bow to falsehoods, and the recognition that male sacrifice is not oppression, but the bedrock that allows the weak to exist and critique it. The imbalance of tears gauges a civilization's strength, and ours is withering from thirst while drowning in feminine lamentation. But make no mistake, identifying the rot is merely the prelude to the amputation. We cannot vote our way out of a spiritual sewer, nor can we negotiate with a pathological ideology that views our existence as an error. The only remedy is the virtue of intolerance, a ferocious rejection of the feminine imperative that prioritizes feelings over facts. By synthesizing these symptoms of decay into a unified understanding of the war on logos, we prepare the ground for the only viable counter-offensive. The re-education of the male spirit through the trivium and the reconstruction of the apprenticeship mastery ladder, effectively seceding from Babylon to build a fortress of rationality. The restoration of the citadel, weaponizing logos to shatter the Babylonian whore. The dirty secret of the modern zeitgeist is that the Babylonian whore of wokeism does not merely desire your compliance. She demands your obliteration. Look at the wreckage around you. The racialized capitalism lie has gutted the economy, transferring wealth from the productive to the parasitic. The indecisive shit test of modern mating has torched the family unit, leaving generations of men raised by single mothers in a Kafkaesque nightmare of family court extortion. And the victimhood asymmetry has turned justice into a battering ram for the malicious. These are not distinct political plights, but a unified grand theory of decay, all stemming from the singular rejection of the transcendental's truth, beauty, and goodness. We have replaced the sublime architecture of the Parthenon with the sloppy, Jishin constructs of critical theory, prioritizing the feelings of the dysfunctional over the stability of the civilization. The West is not suffering from a lack of resources, but a lack of logos, the ordering principle of the universe, and until we re-enshrine the true over the lived experience of the hysterical, we will remain slaves in a genocentric fever dream. To shatter this spell, you must master the weapon of the mind, the trivium. The left does not win debates because their ideas are superior. They win because they cheat the structure of language itself. When a feminazi shrieks diversity is our strength, she is not engaging in dialectic. She is casting a rhetorical spell designed to bypass your logic centers and trigger your social conformity instincts. The antidote is simple, brutal logic. Consider the syllogism of return. Premise A. A stable society requires the suppression of behaviors that destroy social cohesion. Premise B. Leftist ideology champions all behaviors that destroy social cohesion, criminality, divorce, infertility, sodomy. Conclusion: leftist ideology is inherently unstable and self-refuting. By tolerating the intolerant, the woke death cult sows the seeds of its own destruction. Your job is not to engage their emotional tantrums, but to dissect their framing tricks with the scalpel of natural law. When they scream equity, they mean theft. When they chant inclusion, they mean exclusion of the competent. Call out the gamma bias. Reject the straw man and laugh in the face of the ad hominem. Their arguments are houses of cards built by children, and you are the hurricane of reality. This intellectual resurrection requires a physical and spiritual secession from the plantation. You must rebuild the apprenticeship mastery ladder outside the purview of the Leviathan state. The university is a re-education camp for middle management, not a place of learning. Burn your degree and pick up a trade, a skill, a mastery that cannot be devalued by inflation or outsourced to a diversity hire. We must forge parallel civil society associations, guilds of men bound by honor and the pursuit of excellence, creating generational wealth that the cultural Marxists cannot seize. Secede from their currency, secede from their media, and most importantly, secede from their women. The modern mating market is a rigged casino where the house gynocentric family courts and the state always wins, evidenced by the astronomical suicide rates of divorced men and the cuckoldry rates that turn unwitting fathers into genetic dead ends. Starve the beast. Build your own citadel where competence is the only currency and the living spirit of the West roars back to life. The archetype of this new era is the warrior poet, the rational man who synthesizes the ferocity of the battlefield with the intellectual rigor of the scholar. This is the only cure for the effeminization that presages the fall of empires. Weakness is not a virtue. It is a sin against nature. You must harden your body into a vessel of the beautiful and sharpen your mind into a weapon of the true. A man who has mastered his impulses and honed his logic is immune to the siren song of the Feminazis, for he sees her not as a goddess to be worshipped, but as a biological mechanism to be understood and, when necessary, dismissed. The collapse of the West is not a tragedy to be mourned, but a forge in which the remnant will be tempered. We do not want to save the rotting corpse of modernity. We intend to bury it and plant a forest of iron and stone over its grave. The virtue of intolerance is the final key to unlocking your chains. The Babylonian whore has convinced you that tolerance is the highest moral good, a lie designed to disarm you while she slits your throat. True virtue is courage, and courage demands righteous anger. Tolerating evil is complicity in evil. When you tolerate the lie of the wage gap, you validate theft. When you tolerate the lie of toxic masculinity, you validate the castration of your sons. You must cast these demons out of your consciousness with a zealot's fury. The universe is governed by cause and effect, not by the hurt feelings of blue-haired harpies. The restoration of the citadel begins the moment you stop apologizing for your strength and start weaponizing your logos against the darkness. The fire is rising, gentlemen. Walk through it and emerge as the unapologetic masters of your own destiny. You stand now at the precipice, looking down into the abyss of the Plantationocene that the cultural Marxists have constructed for you, but you no longer fear the fall because you have reclaimed the logos. You see the wires of the puppet show. You see that racialized capitalism is nothing more than a resentment-fueled shakedown designed to tax your competence to fund the degenerate hive. You have logically proven that the leftist syllogism is a fraud. They preach tolerance while practicing the most vicious exclusion, and they scream equity while enforcing a rigid hierarchy of victimhood where the weak are worshipped and the strong are cannibalized. You have pulled the ripcord of natural law and escaped the free fall into the feminized void. You are immunized against the guilt trip because you know that Western civilization, born of the trivium, forged in the fires of due process and stabilized by the mixed constitution, is not a stain on history, but the singular light of human achievement that banished the darkness of chaos. Consider the irrefutable data of the battlefield. While the media celebrates the survivor who faced a mean tweet, 80% of suicides are men, 93% of workplace fatalities are men, and 97% of combat deaths are men. Yet the gynocentric narrative demands you apologize for your toxic privilege. This is the gamma bias laid bare, a psychological sleight of hand where male competence is framed as oppression and female emotional volatility is canonized as bravery. You know the truth. When she feigns indecision over the dinner menu, she isn't confused. She is biologically probing for your capacity to lead. And if you fail that simple shit test, you fail the evolutionary mandate of the patriarch. The plantation of modern marriage, presided over by family courts that strip assets and children from fathers in 70% of divorces, is the true exploitation, extracting your labor to fund the very system that demonizes your existence, but you are no longer a drone in that degenerate economy. You have seized the dialectic, mastered the rhetoric, and armed yourself with the syllogism of survival. If excellence is the only metric of the good, and hierarchy is the inevitable result of excellence, then the pursuit of equity is a sin against nature itself. Go forth and build your citadel on this rock of truth. Reject the siren song of the Babylonian whore of wokeism, reascend the apprenticeship mastery ladder, and wield your masculine agency like a sword to cut through the lies. You are the inheritor of the greatest culture in the known universe. Do not let it die in a whimper of apologetic simpering, but let it roar back to life through your unyielding, rational, and glorious refusal to kneel. And now the sponsored book introduction, Feminazis. Let me tell you how I lost my kids, not through addiction, violence, or neglect, but because I dared to exist as a man in a system that treats fatherhood as a crime. When my ex-wife decided our marriage was over, the court handed her the house, the kids, and 40% of my paycheck before I could say due process. All it took was one unverified accusation of emotional abuse, the go-to phrase for mothers weaponizing the state against fathers. Meanwhile, the divorce lawyer drove off in a new Mercedes. That's when I realized equality was never the goal. Control was, profit was. This book isn't a wine session, it's a battle plan. If you're tired of being called toxic for wanting to protect your family, bankrupted by alimony payments to an ex who spends child support on designer handbags, or lectured about male privilege by college-educated activists who've never missed a meal, this is your lifeline. We'll dissect the trillion-dollar divorce industry preying on men, expose how corporations and governments profit from breaking families, and reveal why lowering testosterone, not raising wages, is the real war on working men. You'll learn why 72% of women feel not good enough after Instagram scrolling APA 2022, how Sweden slashed false abuse claims by rejecting feminist hysteria, and why the abortion lobby discards 1.7 million embryos annually while preaching choice. This isn't for the faint-hearted. If you still believe toxic masculinity is a real term or think the wage gap accounts for career choices and overtime, put this book down. Go knit a sweater. For everyone else, we're rebuilding. From the dating apocalypse to the infertility crisis, from the beta male epidemic to the state's war on fatherhood, I've mapped every trap. You'll discover how to shield your assets, reclaim your kids, and ignore the screeching harpies who confuse biology with bigotry. Hungary boosted births by 25% through pro-family policies. You can save your own family. The clock's ticking. They're coming for your sons, your paychecks, and your legacy. Fight or fold your call. Feminazis, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.